Hey guys, I'm Danny Giacopelli, the editorial director of Courier. We're a media brand all about useful, practical stories of modern business. We make Courier magazine, we make podcasts, email newsletters, and a whole lot more. All of it's about how to work better and live smarter. You can find out more about us, how to subscribe and sign up to all things Courier in the comments section. So today we're looking at ways that small business founders can adapt and thrive during tough times, and how you can too. In a bit, we'll hear from two small businesses who have pivoted in recent months, and we'll find out what they've learned. I'll also interview the entrepreneur and investor Tony Conrad, all about ways that founders can prepare themselves for challenges, whatever they may be. But first, I'm with Courier's founder and editor-in-chief, Jeff Taylor, for some macro trends we've been keeping an eye on. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm all very well, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. Jeff, it's incredibly tough right now for small business owners, for all business owners, but particularly for small business owners. What's your take on the outlook for small businesses right now?
You know what? It's complicated. I mean, Danny, we speak to literally hundreds of small businesses of all shapes and sizes around the world. And I think there's two sort of key waves that are going on right now. You have this uncertainty across the economy. You have COVID, social unrest. There's the vacuum of political leadership. You've got some things specific to countries. You've got Brexit in the UK. You have the coming US elections. And I think that's just creating a level of uncertainty I can't remember ever having seen before in the economy. And then coupled with the uncertainty, you have this crazy contradiction going on. The stock market's going through the roof, but there's businesses dropping like flies, right, left and center. You walk down the high street, places are going broke, but we hear from our economic leaders that everything's great and we're going into a V shape. You got politicians saying everything will be over soon with the virus, scientists saying it's going to take a lot longer. You got a lot of businesses doing badly and struggling, but there are some businesses that are doing really well. We hear every sort of one in every six or seven, talking about actually how their sales have gone through the roof because they're in delivery, they're in online retail, some health things, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not giving you a very good answer, but the overarching thing is it is incredibly hard to get a handle on which way is kind of up right now. And I feel like the biggest bit of advice I can give is anyone who says that they know what's going to happen is wrong. And we should probably all kind of assume it's going to be pretty uncertain for a while longer yet.
Yeah, we've seen, I hosted the podcast for Courier all throughout, the peak times of COVID, Courier Daily, and, some huge VC-backed companies failed, ones that you think actually would do quite well for the long term, whereas some tiny little, one man, one woman operations went through the roof, and they, because they found some opportunity they could exploit, they found, a way through the chaos. So yeah, it's really, really uncertain. What advice would you give to small business owners right now in ways of navigating this?
Yeah, I think there's three. It's so hard because everyone is so different. Everyone's business is different. But there's three things I'd urge people to think a little bit about. The first one is, I think this is a time, for want of a better word, to be pessimistic. And by that, I don't mean that everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. But I do think that given the foreseeable future is probably going to be pretty turbulent. There's a great quote, by Andy Grove, "Only the paranoid survive." This is a time to be paranoid. We're not going back to how things were. Like, that's gone. We're not quite sure what's at the end of the tunnel, but it's going to look and feel kind of different to where we were. And that means, given it's going to be choppy for a while, you got to think as a founder, what does it mean for me? How do I cut costs? How do I batten down the hatches? How do I get by with less and survive? Because if you can survive this bit, you're probably going to be fine as things pick up again. But I think whatever your forecast is, you want to plan for things to actually be 20, 40% worse than you think. Whatever your time frame you think is happening, double it. Just be ready to ride this through because it could go on for a bit.
Yeah, one entrepreneur I spoke with recently said, really make your risk planning like what will happen if my co-founder suddenly goes away? What will happen if I don't have any incoming for the next 6 months, 3 months, 12 months? Like, plan all the scenarios out.
I know, it kind of makes a mockery of planning, doesn't it? If someone had sat down at the start of the year going, okay, this year we've done our planning and we're expecting a virus, we're expecting social unrest, people would be like mad. Like, all these things don't happen at once, but we've got a bit of a perfect storm. So I think pessimistic in the short term is really important. Second thing, which sounds contradictory, but it isn't, is a time to be optimistic as well. Like, there's a great expression in mindfulness, and we covered this in the story a while ago. This too shall pass. And it's true. When you're in the middle of the storm, it's hard to see how you get out of it. But actually, of course, we'll get out of it. Of course, things will go back to relatively normal times and things will be good again and there'll be growth. And in that growth, there will be a ton of opportunities and there will be, unfortunately, a bit of a scorched earth. A lot of good businesses have gone broke. But if you can survive, there's going to be great opportunities to take market share because a lot of your competitors may well not still be standing. There's also going to be loads of new business models. It sounds harsh, but it is out of hard times that innovation happens, that new opportunities rise, and the next big businesses, but also the next interesting, fast-growing businesses are going to come out of the pickup that is inevitable. There'll be new sectors, there'll be new models. It always happens. It won't be any different this time. And then I think the third sort of principle I'd give people is it's a time, therefore, to be flexible, be inquisitive, be self-reflective. This is a time to get ready. We're all pretty bruised and tired from navigating these shocks over the last few months, but it's not the time to take a break. It's the time to look at where gaps in the economy are emerging that you might be able to fit into. It's a time to rethink maybe your current business model. Look for signs on the periphery of where you might be able to move to that are active and growing. It's a time to upgrade your skills, whether that's learning to get better at finance, because those people who are able to manage their books really carefully have probably got a better chance of surviving. Do you need to pick up a skill like coding in Swift or something so you can make things yourself because you don't have money to spend on developers, etc. It's now that if you put in that hard work, when things start to pick up, you'll really be in a great place to reap the rewards in the future. So that's not kind of one size fits all really easy solutions, but I think they're three good principles for most founders. Of course, if you're a founder who is in a fast growing area, then just get going. Like, stick with it. Like, if things are already rolling and
keep doing what you're doing.
Good luck to you. Keep doing what you're doing. But one thing I would say to everybody is this news cycle is exhausting. The exogenous shocks we keep getting hit with are exhausting. And whilst it's a time to work hard, you've got to look after yourself as well. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We don't know when it's over. It's time to be with your family, to decompress, to look after your look after your health. There's no value in a current or future business if you're too exhausted to be able to get going when things get good.
Yeah, it's no coincidence our strapline is work better, live smarter. It's not just about work. There's got to be a little life in there.
Get a little life in there as well.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Jeff Taylor there, Courier's editor-in-chief and founder. And as we've just talked about, in recent months, we've been talking to loads of small business owners all over the world, almost all of whom have had to pivot and adapt to keep their business afloat during the pandemic. One of those people is JP Then. He's the founder of Crosstown Donuts here in London. It's a really popular donut brand with brick and mortar outlets all over the place. He's also the founder of a new e-commerce delivery platform called Slurp, which lets retailers and restaurants carry out on-demand delivery quickly. Another entrepreneur is Caitlin Zano, who runs a New York-based company called Porter & Sale. Once upon a time, they were a hotel concierge app, but Caitlin's now pivoted to offering what she calls hotel credits. JP and Caitlin are joined now by Courier's Amira Jiwa. She's the co-host of our new workshop podcast, and I'll hand it over to Amira right now.
Thanks, Danny. So as Danny said, we are speaking today with two, founders of small businesses that have really responded to COVID in different ways. And that is JP Then from Crosstown and Slurp, two different businesses. And then we've got Caitlin Zano of Porter & Sale here today with us. Thanks for joining, both of you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the first question is really going to be kind of what is your business and how did it look before COVID began and kind of what does it look like now a few months later? So maybe Caitlin, we can start with you and Porter and Sale.
Yeah, definitely. So Porter and Sale essentially is a marketplace to purchase discounted gift cards to some of the world's best hotels. We brought in ultimate flexibility as well. So you don't commit to a time. The expiration dates are super far out. They can be transferable to anybody. So essentially what we tried to do is bring in all of the flexibility that I think travelers and consumers not only need, but like demand at this point in travel, and incentivize engaging in travel through putting this great discount to some of the world's truly very best hotels. That's what we are today. Our core product is called Hotel Credits. What we were previously was a mobile concierge app and a pre-arrival sort of e-commerce platform for guests to engage with the hotel from the moment they've made their booking until they left. So everything was mobile-based. It was about being in your hotel. It was about the experience of on property. So an entirely different business from that respect.
Amazing. That must have been a pretty big switch to make quite quickly.
I mean, truly within the span of 5 business days, we had a business, we had revenue, we lost 99% of our revenue in March. All of our products became obsolete that we had spent like 5 years working on. And then we built Hotel Credits as a concept very quickly and launched it within 48 hours. So literally within the span of a week, our entire business completely pivoted and changed. Even our stakeholders changed. Like we were a B2B SaaS platform, and now we are a B2C e-commerce. Yeah.
And JP, I think your businesses, both of them, have similarly kind of had to adjust because of COVID, maybe in slightly different directions. So Let's start with Crosstown. What is Crosstown? What did it look like, and kind of how have things changed over the last few months?
Sure. So Crosstown is a brand that's based in London, in the UK. We're a multi-site or omni-channel bakery brand. We specialize in donuts and coffee. Pre-COVID, we're predominantly a retail concept. So we had 20 plus sites throughout London. That was about 80% of our business, and very similar to so many businesses in the world. Pretty much overnight, that revenue went to zero. We were obviously forced to close with lockdown. And really the change that happened, I almost feel like there's been 5 changes in the past 6 months, but the immediate pivot was actually to create what we call the Crosstown Collective. And what we did was we banded together with other hospitality businesses that were essentially in trouble. And we created these grocery boxes where people who were supplying bread, milk, all sorts of goods, people that we use in our supply chain, we kind of looked at ourselves and went, okay, our business is dried up overnight. What are we good at? Well, we've got warehousing, we've got logistics. How do we put that to use? And that's how the collective was born. It definitely wasn't part of the plan to ever sell bread or milk or fruit and veg, but it became a big part of our business early on and really got us through a really tough period where retail's still really struggling in London.
Yep, and then on the flip side, I know you have the second business, Slurp, which kind of maybe has taken off a little bit because it focuses on online delivery. So has that been the case? And it'd be good to get an introduction to what Slurp is as well.
Sure. Slurp, it's had a very almost opposite impact compared to Crosstown. It's direct-to-consumer online ordering. So essentially, we power businesses and brands and enable them to have their website doing online ordering, but specifically they can do on-demand ordering throughout London and then the rest of the UK. So that has gone through a significant growth phase. We've had pretty incredible growth over the last 6 months. I think the big change is that online ordering has become a pillar to food and beverage businesses now. It was always kind of incremental revenue, but now I feel it's been treated as a true revenue stream for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we're more than a few months into COVID now, so I think both of you have kind of weathered some of the storm as far as we've gotten in so far, and have kind of come out on the other side. But is there anything that you would have done differently at the start? Were you slower to pivot, or, did you make some mistakes that now in retrospect, you could have figured something else out instead?
It's a challenge, right? Because hindsight's 2020. And I think, one of the things is we saw this coming right in early February, because some of our largest shareholders are hospitality owners. Everyone on our board are hotel owners based out of Asia. And we started to see occupancy rates really get hit. And then even February, as it started to come in Europe, and I was in Italy during the outbreak, I was based out of Rome. And I remember talking to my co-founder and being like, don't sign the lease for our new office space. Like, we're going to be shut down. And he was like, if you do this now, you're going to seem so alarmist. And I was like, no, you don't understand. And I got on a plane, and I think 5 days later, we're based out of New York. New York was on total lockdown. So, I think we saw it coming, and we could have moved quicker, because truly every single week matters, every month matters for our runway. And it's like, could we have made changes in February? We were going out there still trying to book revenue, even while this was going down, that is totally obsolete at this point, right? And so, I think if we would have been a little bit more quick before, when we saw it starting to come, and say, how can we future-proof our business, because we feel like travel might get hit right now, that would have given us new resources, new perspective. And then I think the other thing is, hotels were coming in hard and fast in March. Like, every single person wanted to be on the platform. We just couldn't keep up with it. We had cut our team down at that point by like 70%. I almost wish we would have thought of a way to say yes to more business, because we had to turn people away. We just couldn't onboard fast enough. And so trying to figure out, I guess, how could we have optimized, I think, the onboarding to get more hotels in, because now you're looking at the height of the summer, and some hotels are really optimistic about travel. And so it's definitely a different conversation from us on the hotel sales perspective. So I just think, again, hindsight's 2020. I'm pretty proud of what we've done overall, but did we see it coming, and could we have made changes a little bit earlier, or at least prepared for the storm a little bit more when we saw it? I think so. And then could we have been even more opportunistic when we saw this flood of interest? I also think so. But it's been so volatile that every single week is changing. And in travel, it's really, really insane. So what's true one week, truly doesn't make sense the next week. So it is hard to have that sort of perspective. But I think we knew it was there. We knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that just following that, like the hardest part at the moment is to forecast.
Yeah. Right.
You can't actually get a lay of the land of what's going on in a week, 2 weeks, a month, let alone 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. So it's a tough one when you think about what we could have done differently, because I felt we moved quick. We moved as quick as we possibly could have as a small business. But we couldn't have seen what was coming, right? We couldn't have seen that our revenue was going to drop off by such dramatic numbers because of a forced lockdown, for example. The thing that I sort of look back at and go, what could we have done differently, is the things that we're actually doing now. It's like it forced us to innovate in a positive way, I would say. So, for example, Crosstown, we've always talked about extending our product line and moving beyond just donuts and coffee. And we're about 6-7 years old now. And we've talked about it for years about, let's move into the broader sweet treat category. What else can we do? And we've always been like, we'll just keep working on what we're doing. We're expanding our reach through stores, etc. And really what I feel this period has done is it's accelerated some of those views that we've had. And we recently launched ice cream, for example, which has been something that we want to do, and it's forced us to do it. It's really started to make us think about our online offering in a bigger way. So things like merchandise. We've always been like, we should do it. It's one of those things, we'll delay. But now we're actually like, no, let's do this, because online has to be a channel for us, because we don't have the visibility of what our shops are going to do. So I think almost like flipping the question a little bit, I feel like the things that we're doing now, we probably could have done over the last couple of years. But really, I don't think there's anything that we could have done to react in March where it was really just like quite chaotic and about survival, really.
I guess, a somewhat related question, but a little bit different. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned over the last, 4 or 5 months? And those could be about business and your business in particular, but also just personally, because, periods of kind of a lot of uncertainty and change are also potentially periods of growth.
What JB was just saying around you were thinking and looking at the business and being like, why haven't we been doing this over the past several years? That has definitely been the thing that sort of slapped us in the face. We are running a much better, our business is it's much more sound. We're making better decisions about spend. We're making better decisions about raising capital, where that's coming from, how we're looking at it. I think previously because it kept on working. We were under this pattern of we need more money. We'll go out, we'll ask our shareholders, we'll raise more, we'll invest. We threw money at a lot of problems rather than be wait, this is product market fit. Let's look at it. And actually let's do the opposite of throwing money into it. Let's try and fix it. And then if we see the data that shows that it's working, then that's going to be the right justification to invest in it. And we only, in a way, started doing that now. Maybe pre-seed we were good at that, but we sort of got into this growth period of just growing and scaling, and all of our, dollars were largely coming from equity. And that is not where we are at all right now. We had to basically plan to run a business with no revenue coming from hotels, even though there is some, but it's just it's not reliable. We don't know if hotels are going to be closed next month. So we've had to think about, how do we run a business with no revenue? How do we run a business when no one is traveling and you are a travel business selling travel? How do you future-proof in terms of bringing in capital and shoring up capital now and not assuming it's going to be available later? And so that's allowed us to run a much better, tighter, leaner, smarter business where we're looking at our resources. We're not doing things that we don't have the capacity to do. We're not overextending ourselves. So that's been just the biggest lesson learned from our perspective, and really being lean and scrappy in the truest sense of the word. We keep on saying we're like a pre-seed company. Good for us. Everyone should operate like a pre-seed company. Nobody should be throwing huge amounts of money around unless you have that demand that's showing you need. The only way to capitalize on it is to invest in it. Otherwise, it's we should all be operating like mom and pop shops out of 1980. That's brick and mortar, and you're just looking at what you have coming in and you're not spending more. I'm excited about the next evolution of small businesses and startups, and those that have been able to weather this storm. I think are going to come out much sharper and smarter, and we're going to sort of break this ridiculous bubble that I think everyone was in.
Yeah, I think it's being more focused, right? It's being lean and making better decisions is definitely something that we've learned. Putting innovation at the forefront, it's always been a big part of the culture of both Crosstown and Slurp, but I think it's almost just become the identity of survival, to make sure that you innovate in the right way, in a positive way as well. I think another big learning was, for me, it's a little bit different, but trusting the staff to work remote has been such an interesting learning. Crosstown pre-COVID had about 140 staff across all the different departments, and we obviously had a head office, and everyone was expected to be there Monday to Friday, and overnight, everyone's working from home, but we're still surviving. We're still doing well, and those team members have done exceptional to work remotely. So I know that's a big theme that's coming through about remote working and how does it survive in the long term. But I think if you're a small business and you can actually trust your staff and empower them, they can do a great job. And that's something as a small business owner, you're probably like, oh no, you need to have oversight of everything. But actually, empowering your staff and letting them get on with it is definitely a big learning for me that I've seen through Crosstown. With Slurp, I think the biggest lesson learned is, we went through a huge growth period and we were completely, understaffed in many respects. And I could have pulled the trigger on hiring some people earlier when I thought I would need them. But, it's tough when you're on a lean budget. When you're a startup, you need to sort of make decisions at the right time. And again, you couldn't have forecasted what was coming. So it's a tough one to say whether we did the right or wrong thing. But in hindsight, it would have been good to have more resource. And yeah, definitely would have helped to scale even quicker, to be honest.
Yeah, on that point about how it's still basically, we couldn't forecast what was coming, but we still can't. There's a lot of uncertainty to come, and both of you have alluded to how it's almost impossible to future-proof your business. But what are the things that you are doing, as two founders that ended up being able to pivot really quick and respond maybe faster than other small businesses? Kind of maybe you have some advice or kind of the strategies that you're taking could be useful to others.
It's such a hard question. I have a want from a personal perspective, right? Which is my personality to I'm a big planner. I want to know what's going on. I keep on trying to do these roadmaps, but truly every single month it's just changing. And again, travel is changing so fast. Consumer sentiment around travel is changing fast. So our own messaging of how we explain ourselves needs to change, because you don't want to seem out of touch with what's going on. You don't want to be telling people to travel if you're seeing spikes, right? So it's how do we do this? And so what we've taken to doing is planning 90 days out, having very thoughtful top of the week and end of the week meetings, really doing a lot of data-driven analysis, paying attention to what we're seeing, reading the room, essentially, staying super agile, all being comfortable with, if we think this is right, it might be right for right now, but we all as a team have to understand that choice can change. And that's no one's fault, and that's not something that we have to hold on to. I think this is sort of how I would define the key of resiliency, and also a level of vulnerability. There's no ego in anything. You need to look at the opportunity, be able to go after it. And even if you thought this way would work, and maybe it did, if it's not anymore, everyone on the team has to be comfortable with dropping it and going again. And, you have values and you have ethics and we have objectives and goals. We know what success looks like, and we try and benchmark success from a qualitative and quantitative perspective every 30 days, every 90 days, 30 days, every week, so that we can measure and we're not biasing the data. But it's just laying it out, trying to hit it, and getting this culture where everyone gets that you need to read the room, essentially, and look at consumer demand and look out how things are shifting and move quickly to react.
Yeah, completely agree. It's about being nimble. It's totally about being nimble and reactive in the right way. A really good example for Slurp was when the government announced here in the UK that they would really push people to order their food when you're in premises through a device. That was never on our roadmap. QR code ordering, I never thought would be something that would come back or even start to become relevant. But essentially what we did in the space of a week was build out a QR order at table function because it was a government recommendation. And that meant that we had to shift our roadmap, right? Because it never was a priority, never thought it would be. But it was kind of repurposing a bit of tech that we had as now part of our offer at Slurp to say, well, if you want to do order at table, contactless ordering, you can do it through this process. So I think keeping nimble and listening to, well, what's the advice coming our way, whether it's through the government, but also listening to the customers, right? They're telling us what they want. From a crosstown perspective, we've had heaps of people who've essentially moved out of London who used to be based in London and then living at home and further out. So they're saying, hey, we want to eat your donuts. We can't order them. What do we do? So we've had to build out national shipping. It's become part of our offer now that it's forced us to think about our packaging differently. How do we maintain the freshness? Because it's a one-day shelf life. All those things we've had to innovate and really push ourselves to say, well, this is what our customers are telling us they want now. So we have to provide that. And that kind of links back to the original question about being innovative and making sure that you react in a positive way. Those things also intertwine with this about future-proofing, making sure that you're nimble and you can react and listen and keep your ear to the ground.
Great. So last question related to that, I guess, beyond being reactive, beyond being nimble, what advice do you have for people that might be pivoting, their businesses and trying something entirely new, or, first-time founders beginning something in a somewhat crazy environment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, sort of boiling up all the things that we've been talking about, those are the foundations, I think, to run an overall successful business in any environment, right? So being hiring a team that you can trust, being able to, as a leader, assign your team ownership over what they're creating and bringing agency and vision to the table as a team. Building a culture of being nimble, being agile. For us, from our perspective, being data-driven. I'm sure in different businesses, there's a different metric that you're looking at, but really paying attention to what consumer demand is, not holding on to what you thought was true and not biasing the data, just looking at it and reacting to that. Not taking in tons of cash or not overspending, being really mindful of that right balance. It's certainly a sweet spot. I mean, JP, you're saying that Slurp, maybe you didn't hire early enough to be able to capitalize on that growth, but like you have to know how to read that trend line, right? Because I don't think anything is a given anymore. And I don't think the way that businesses were run, it's just not relevant anymore. So the very best thing that you can do, at least small businesses and startups, what you can do is run the very best business you can do based on fundamentals of how to create and grow a company. And again, being mindful of your spend and really paying attention to product market fit. You need to build something that people want. And I think there were a lot of things that people put a lot of money into that nobody really wanted. And so, make sure that there's a demand for what you're building. And if not, figure out, different ways that you might be able to, as you said, we're talking about pivoting. Everyone pivoted. We both pivoted, right? So being able to let go and say, well, I thought people wanted this, but they kind of want a different version of that, and run with that and be smart enough to see that and execute on it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they come up with an idea for a business, they get they get their blinkers on.
Yeah.
They're very specific about what they want, and they don't want to deviate from that path. And I think that's kind of gone out the window. And an example from Crosstown, I spent 6 months writing this Crosstown business plan. It was the most elaborate thing I've written. It was so detailed, had every figure, every element you could think of. And it didn't have the word wholesale in it. And for the first year, 80% of our business was wholesale. Yeah. It says everything, right? You can plan for everything, and actually we're like, okay, it was Selfridges who came along, of all people, we're like, we've got to do this. And that sort of snowballed into all these independent coffee shops wanting us, and was like, this just never was a part of the plan, but we've got to run with it. So I think you've got to be open to that, particularly now, and to react to uncertainty. The other bit of advice I would give any startup founder or anyone who's looking to start something is find a business partner. Mm-hmm. Find someone who is very different to you but has the same work ethic, and leverage that relationship. In both Slurp and Crosstown, I have co-founders or business partners, and we're all very, very different, and that brings a lot to the table because you don't get stuck in your own mind. You can actually share that with other people, and it's a journey. Like, there's ups and downs, there's twists and turns, and you need to be able to lean on them at the right times, and they need to lean on you. So I think having business partners is extremely important.
Right. Thanks. That's fantastic advice. And honestly, thank you both so much for your time. I know, we all know that small business has really suffered over the last few months. So it is great to, hear some case studies and get some learnings from founders that have managed to, not just survive, but maybe thrive through the crisis. So thanks. Thanks, Caitlin. And thanks, JP, too.
Thanks a lot.
Great. Now I'm going to pass back to Danny, Courier's editorial director, and he will be speaking with Tony Conrad to get investors' perspective on kind of how small businesses can make things work in these tough times.
Thanks, Amir. Lots of really great and helpful tips there from Amir and her panel. Well, for a bit more on how business owners can prepare themselves for the road ahead, I'm joined now by a man who has been there and done that, and hopefully has some valuable and hard-won lessons to share with you. Tony Conrad is an entrepreneur and venture capitalist focused on early-stage tech companies. He's a partner at True Ventures, where he's invested in everyone from WordPress to Blue Bottle Coffee, and he's the founder of About.me and Sphere, both of which were acquired. Tony joins me now. How you doing, Tony?
Hey, Danny. Great to see you, man.
How's California?
On fire.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unfortunately.
So Tony, basically, I wanted to talk to you today because as I said there, I mean, a bit cheekily, but you've been there, you've done that, you've started companies, you're an investor now, so you're on both sides of the aisle. What would you say right now to young business founders who are looking at this craziness right now, everything that's happening out there in the world, from the pandemic to, social unrest to a, cratering economy, and they're thinking about, whether or not they should start a business right now. I mean, it's kind of not necessarily a logical time to start something new and take a lot of risk. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I think this is probably maybe the greatest moment potentially in my career for people to start a company. It's just there's just such an exceptional number of things that are happening at the same time here that are forcing everybody to kind of look at things and kind of to reassess, like where it is and how they could actually upset the model and do it differently. And they're kind of being forced to do that, to be honest, right? So we could talk about it from two different angles. One is from, kind of a venture scale angle. And that's to me very, very crystal clear. And then there's the angle of the smaller, business owner and should they be thinking about this moment and what does it mean for them? So clearly from a venture scale perspective, this is the great accelerant. The pandemic in particular has driven a lot of, behaviors online. We're seeing it across our portfolio, not only in the consumer facing businesses like Madison Reed, which is providing hair color, so you can imagine. I mean, you can't go to hair salons. That's something that's important to people.
Yeah, we've interviewed Amy rather recently, and she had to close down all of her brick and mortar salons, and at home orders have gone through the roof. So e-commerce for hair dyeing has really gone through the roof.
And Amy's one of our venture partners at True as well. So we really get to kind of see the inside scoop of that beyond just being an investor, but the emotional kind of roller coaster of it all as well. Companies like Musician, which are, a learning platform for how to learn to play a guitar or whatever. There's AvidBots, which is a company that's doing industrial cleaning at scale, right, for commercial cleaning with robots versus using humans to do that. So there's all kinds of things that are accelerating here on a venture side of the equation. But I think for the smaller business person out there, this is a moment where it's incredibly challenging. Where I think, like, if you're dependent on a physical kind of footprint, so to speak, you really got to reimagine your business, and you have to really, take things like online relationships, or how do you build community, even if it's in a kind of a non-internet, kind of fashion. How do you build these kind of vertically integrated communities? Because people want that, people need that, especially in a pandemic. People are starving for it. So, I think that there's just a ton of stuff that if I was a small business person, I'd be thinking about it. Like, do I have a real online presence? WordPress is great for that. I don't mean to pimp WordPress, but it really is a wonderful tool for that. How do I think about, using Shopify or WooCommerce from WordPress? How do I think about enabling my users out there that are big fans of my brand, so to speak, to continue to have that relationship? So it's, sitting back and kind of going, got to ride this out until people can come back in the store or the shop or whatever it is. I think that's a flawed strategy. I don't think we're going to see a return to that behavior anytime soon. And even when we do return to the possibility of that behavior, I think it will be possibly a stampede in the first few days, and followed by a level of nervousness and caution and wait a minute, can't have so many people in the store at the same time, can't do a lot of things the way we used to do. So I think you have to really rethink everything. Restaurants are a particular area where I've been thinking about. As you know, we were investors in Blue Bottle, and I've seen them kind of how they've navigated this. And it's really interesting to me. I think restaurants as a whole will suffer disproportionately in this pandemic. I think we'll see massive closures, maybe up to 75%, certainly 50%, but probably up to 75% of businesses, restaurants will actually have to reinvent themselves or close. I'm watching people like Michael Mina, who's a fairly famous chef here in the Bay Area, and just how he's rethinking about having more centralized cooking areas, less kind of physical spaces for people to eat at, thinking about carry out, delivery. How do you cook the food in a different way in order for it to transport in an Uber Eats kind of delivery mechanism or a caviar mechanism, whatever that is. Like really rethinking all this stuff. And those kind of businesses are going to end up thriving. People are not going to have less desire to have good food versus the food they cook in their home sometimes. And I just think there's tremendous opportunity for those people that really think about it and get ahead.
Do you think a crisis is particularly lucrative, though, particularly lucrative time to start a business? Not just that, sure, small businesses could survive in a time like this, but actually this might be the perfect time to start a business, assuming you can survive.
It's the perfect time. So we'll talk about it from two angles. It's once again, a lot of people in the audience here are working on things that maybe wouldn't apply to venture scale type stuff. But I know from a venture scale perspective, if you're thinking about that, there's no better time to start a business than in a downturn. Our biggest businesses have always, that we funded, have always come out of these downturns. Fitbit was in, the 2008 crisis. We funded it, famously, I think 2 weeks after 9/11. 9/11, but, after the financial meltdown. We've just had a lot of stuff that's kind of come out of these moments where I think what happens is the relationship between capital and the founders becomes more balanced. Pricing doesn't get ahead of itself, or it's not too egregious. So you end up having these much more aligned models and relationships, and great businesses kind of get built out of that. Sorry about that. That was my phone. But, so I think that is, I think that's a particularly, good opportunity if you're thinking about internet stuff. If you're thinking about a more kind of what I'll call smaller and traditional business, I would wait just a little bit more. I think we're going to see some of the benefits of reduced rents, reimagined spaces and whatever. I think this is a good time to kind of really learn as much as you possibly can. I mean, really be active and approach each day like it's, you may not have your shop open, but like really like approach each day like it's a work day, like, get online and like figure out and read and talk to people and find out what's working and whatnot, and be ready in order to like kind of pounce on, what I'll think will be much friendlier leases, commercial spaces and things like that. There's just too much commercial space out there for it to go away. It's not just going to go away. It's got to get filled by somebody, and that somebody could be you, or it could be you expanding your business. I think if I'm like Blue Bottle and I'm looking at it, I'm going, all right, there's going to be a flood of, new, really awesome, interesting spaces out there. Let's be ready to go for it. We just invested in a company called Modern Animal, which is in the veterinarian space. And, I think the timing on this is actually, we think we're going to be able to get killer centralized spaces, in major urban environments, that will be much friendlier from a rent perspective. And also, we think we can offer like a much better experience than what people are currently getting. Because we've thought through like, how do you create an online community around this stuff and all that?
One of my favorite things about your career, Tony, is that you've done quite a lot of different things. You've had a billion different jobs in your career.
2 billion.
You're a book bindery glue machine operator. You're a janitor. You're a baseball umpire. You've really done quite a lot of things. You lived in Jakarta, you've lived in France, what big challenges have you faced personally? And how did you get over them basically and kind of come out on the other side?
Yeah, I think everybody has many bumps in the road, some more than others. But like for me, I had a couple of different bumps along the way. One was I remember early in my career, I got this prized opportunity to move to Paris and to work with BSN and Groupe Danone. And I got there and, I really couldn't speak French very well. And it's kind of hard to do your job in a country when you don't speak the language, especially a consumer company. And so I just spun like a top in the wind. And I think after a couple of months, I just finally said no mas and,
wrong language,
wrong language, but you got it. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I stopped waiting for them to solve my problem. And I decided to solve my own problem. And I just went to them, the head of the company, and I just said, listen, I need to move out of Paris. I'm never going to learn to speak French, here. Every time I open my mouth, somebody responds to me in their broken English, and I don't blame them, but I need to move someplace where that's not an option. And so I moved to the southern part of France. I became a yogurt merchandiser of all things for about 6 months, and then I went into sales. And by the end of that, kind of experience, I was really well equipped linguistically and also culturally, and I understood the products better anyways. So by the time I went back to Paris, I was set up for success. And so I learned that it's like, you think everybody else is taking care of you, but that's not really the case. The second lesson I learned when I moved back to the States early on is, I worked with a group that I kind of took the job because it was an interesting job. It was, investing in venture and all that, but I really wasn't excited about the people per se. And I knew that going in, but I kind of justified it for myself. Venture's hard business to get involved in. It was a bus that pulled up and I jumped on it. It was just a really bad bus. And after like 4 or 5 years of just misery and carrying that burden of unhappiness into your job every day and going into your home every night, it's just miserable. And I just finally said, I'm not doing that. And it's kind of what led me to start my own business, to kind of reset that. And then when I did go back into venture with John Callahan and Phil Black, who had started True Ventures and asked me to be a part of the early team along with Tony Schneider. The thing that was beautiful about that was these were 3 people that I loved and trusted. And I just can't put enough emphasis on that, that is such a basic concept to work with people that you love and you're jazzed to see and all that. It's a really, really hard to find.
Yeah, you put quite a big emphasis before on, a support structure. Whether it's a co-founder or friends or mentors or, a role model that you look up to or advisors. If I'm a small business right now, would you highly suggest to have kind of a board of friendly people around me that I could use as a sounding board, or what?
1000%. And if those people, if you love and trust them, you can say anything to them. You can share your most shameful moments. Oh my God, I did this. I said this. I lost my cool. I did whatever. I'm looking at the, composition of my team and it really lacks any, sense of inclusion and, diversity and just, all these kind of things that you wrestle with as a small business owner or as a venture scale business owner. And that, you want to deal with because you understand the power of like how this positive environment is impacting you and impacting the quality of the work that you do. Therefore, you want to make sure that you're creating that environment for everybody else who's coming in as a part of your organization, right? It's your responsibility to recreate that. And so it helps you to start thinking about how you screen for people that you hire. like what are your objectives? How do you onboard people? How do you create fraternity and foster really, kind of deep, open, honest, relationships? All that kind of stuff is really, really important. Doesn't matter if you're a 5-person team or a 500-person team. It's the basic building block to success. If you don't have trust and love for the people that you work with, it will not work eventually. You will pay a price.
Yeah. And perhaps finally, given all of the craziness out there in the world, you turn on the news, you open up your internet browser, you scroll on Instagram. It's not really a pleasant time right now. How do you as a founder just get zen and tune everything out, put on blinders and just focus on the job that needs to be done? Because it's so easy just to become stressed out, have anxiety, wake up and just kind of freak out every day. How do you stay calm and focused in the Tony zone?
Well, I wouldn't say I always succeed, to be honest. Yeah. I've developed a lot of good habits along the way. I exercise routinely. I stretch in the morning. I try to do some mindfulness during each day. There's just a bunch of different things that I'm trying to do to stay sane. But one of the things is, and it's really hard not to do, but you just got to turn the news off. I mean, honestly, it doesn't mean be unaware of what's happening, because there are real things happening, especially in our country. You don't want to be dumb about it, and you don't want to be uninvolved and ineffective in a moment like this. You really want to look back and say, I gave something to it, but you can't allow yourself to become obsessed and absorbed by the negative news media cycles. It's just really, really horrible on the brain, and it will impact your work. That's the first thing. Second thing is I'm realizing through this pandemic, it's like every day feels a little bit like a work day and every day feels a little bit like a holiday. The reality is when you work from home, one of the secrets I've known for a very long time is that you're in hyper efficiency mode, and I can do my job, to be honest, I can do my job in 2 days, when I'm doing it from home, and I can block out all the travel, all the face-to-face meetings, all the inefficiencies in the system, right? Which, by the way, are not bad. Those serve you in a different way, but you really are much, much more efficient in this environment. So you need to remind yourself, you need to schedule in real vacation. You need to schedule in, a real life, that's not constantly a little plugged in. These phones and, all this technology, right, has just made these lines blurred already. This pandemic has just supermaxed that. And I'm just now getting back to a good habit of I don't work on weekends, of course there's always an exception, right? Even in normal times, there's an exception, but I don't really work on weekends. And I'm just hey, I'm going to go surf. I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to ride my bike a little longer on Saturday and Sunday. And on Monday, I'm going to schedule things at 9 a.m. like we're doing today, or, our Friday or whatever it is. It's all that stuff.
Yeah. It's easy to forget the things that matter. Obviously for a small business, you need to survive and you need to make money and you need to, feed your family. But, a business in and of itself is not the reason for being on this planet unless you're providing some sort of life-saving technology or something. In the end, you need a life too, right?
Yeah. But I go back to if you're a small business and you're in this moment and you're not able to open or have the efficiency that you normally would, if you're just spending all your time spinning your wheels, chasing after something that's not actually attainable, right? If the macro environment is really bad, there's not going to be a flood of people that are going to be able to come into your environment. And so you've got to really be disciplined to carve out some really excellent time for yourself to learn and educate yourself, and to be talking with people and to figure out what does work, right? I do know the power of that. I see that as part of the magic of Silicon Valley is that It's not that we're better technologists or we're smarter than anybody else. It's just that we're all here together. And therefore, I can ask Evan Williams, founder of Twitter and now Medium, or I can ask other people, my friends. I see them and I can ask them like, well, how are you thinking about, issue X, Y, or Z? And it's so incredibly helpful to have that community of people that you can learn and borrow from.
Great. Thanks, Tony. That was great. Tony Conrad there from True Ventures.
Thanks. Great to see you, Danny.
And thanks to everyone for tuning into this session from all of us here at Courier. Again, we're all about making your business and hopefully your life just a bit better. Everything we do is packed with useful, practical tips and stories. If you want to sign up to our newsletters, subscribe to our magazine, or listen to our podcasts, just head to the link provided in the comments or go to Mailchimp.com/Courier. Thanks again.